Shalom and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. This is a recording of a teaching with TBA Rabbinic resident Julia Knobloch.
For those who don't know me, my name is Julia Knobloch, but I think I've met most of you since I started being one of the residents at Beth Am. There's one other resident here with us, David Kaplinsky, who I'm sure everyone has met. And I'm doing once a month, I'm doing a look at Israeli Hebrew poetry. And last time was the first time I did it, and it was about Nachman Bialik. I was going to alternate between female and male writers and Israel and out of Israel, but because of this parsha, I just couldn't resist to do another male Israeli poet, who's no other less than Yehuda Amichai, because he wrote a poem that's called Jacob and the Angel, and it was just too fitting to go with the parsha that I just couldn't resist. Just like with Bialik, summarizing Yehuda Amichai in just 20 minutes, in a few minutes is not enough time, but just like he was born 1924 in Germany, and he came to Palestine in the mid-30s. And so he was writing in Hebrew, which is not his native language, because obviously he grew up speaking German. And scholars write that he's also very much influenced by by German poetry, mostly Rilke, but obviously he is also very much had developed like a feeling for the modern Hebrew, the colloquial modern Hebrew, and he was steeped in Jewish tradition. He grew up Orthodox. As he became a young adult, or during his young adulthood, he stopped being observant, but he was so steeped in it that like his poetry is so Jewish in so many ways, that you could tell that even though he stopped being observant or even believing, he wrote very, very intense and deep, and I want to say sacred, like poetry, secular poetry influenced and shaped by the sacred. And one of the main elements in his poetry is time and the passage of time and the desire to repeat and remember moments and to hold on to them, to inscribe them, and thereby ourselves, the people who are living them, into the book of life. And arguably, it's also one of the major characteristics of Judaism. When we as mortals try to inscribe ourselves into the eternal book of life, there's a clash. There's a clash between the mundane and the holy, between the secular and the sacred, the religious, because one is finite and the other is not finite, infinite. And we find this very constant clash in Amichai's poetry. But in my view, and I think I'm not alone, he combines these clashing two sides into something that is, well, not smooth, but something that will always leave us longing for something, but at the same time bestows sufficient sort of holiness and eternity, that it makes a secular moment, takes a secular moment and turns it into something sacred. And often then, though, this moment passes, like moments of intimate encounters, as so often in Amichai's poetry, the poems deal with love, with sexual intimacy, with closeness between lovers, with breakups. But all these moments, for their intensity, allow those mortals to get a glimpse of the divine. And a lot of these things I find in the poem Jacob and the Angel, which we are going to look at. But before we are going to look at, and we're going to focus on Jacob and the Angel, I brought another one just if we have time. But before we look at the poem, I just wanted to remind us of those lines that this poem quotes, even though many of you may have heard them this morning. And I'm just going to read them for the sake of time in English. So we are at the moment when Jacob is encountering the Ish, the being, the divine being that he's struggling with. And they're struggling, and we're at the moment when the socket of Joseph's hip is strained. And then Joseph said, "Let me go, for dawn is breaking." But he answered, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." Said the other, "What is your name?" He replied, "Jacob." Said he, "Your name shall no longer be Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with beings divine and human, and you have prevailed." Jacob asked, "Pray tell me your name." But he said, "You must not ask my name," and he took leave of him there. So I am going to read the first poem, both in Hebrew and the English, and then I have a few things I want to share about them, but I hope you have also some impressions to share. But first let me read the poem. Yaakov ve'hamalach, livnot boka ne'ancha ve'tafsa oto kach, ve'nitzchach oto, ve'tafas ota kach, ve'nitzchach ota. Hem yad'u shnehem tefez mevi mavet. וויתרו זה לזה על אמרית השם. אבל באור הראשון של שחר ראה את גופה, שנשאר לבן במקומות שבגד הים אתמול כיסה. אחר כך קראו לה פתאום מלמעלה פעמיים, כמו שקוראים לילדה ממשחקה בחצר. וידע את שמה, ונתן לה ללכת. And the translation is from Robert Alter, Jacob and the Angel. Toward morning, she sighed and grabbed him, so, and he defeated him. And he grabbed her so and defeated her. The two of them knew that the hold brings death. They dispensed with the saying of names. But in the first light of dawn, he saw her body, which had stayed white in the places the bathing suit yesterday covered. After, they called her suddenly from above, twice, as one calls a little girl from her game in the yard. And he knew her name, and he let her go. So, I know some of you have looked at the poem before, and now as we were reading them. And I'm happy to share some of my impressions, but I wanted to see what comes up when they read the poem, and what kind of feeling do you have compared to where it takes its inspiration from, and what he turns it into. What are some features from those passages in this so famous passage from this week's parsha that he plays with in this poem? Denise. Yeah, thank you. Stan. Yeah. Yes, I thought it was an amazing remark to make, something actually that had not occurred to me. So for those of you online, the first comment from Denise was that she just appreciated how Amichai took the origin of took the parsha, the passage, and turned it into the poem, and how he transformed it. And Stan just mentioned that his wife remarked on the word choice of Pamaim twice when they call the woman in the poem, how it reminded of the scene when Abraham is about to sacrifice Isaac, and then the angel appears and calls twice to Abraham. So that's interesting to think about what that means. Did you have your hand up? Yeah. Yes. Mm-hmm. Thank you. So Rabbi Fields-Meyer was pointing out that there is in the middle of the poem, which is often very, very important to note where something is placed in a poem, that the body of the woman has it's when it describes the parts that had been left, like, bikini lines, they are left white, but it is also the same name. It's the same word and the same name for Lavan, whom Jacob has just left after serving many, many years for him, and having had many, many troubles with him and being schemed by him. So that was interesting to note. I did not make that connection with Lavan, but I love it, especially because of Jacob. It adds another layer to this whole weaving, I think, that Amichai does in terms of taking iconic passages from Torah and turning them into, bringing them down to the day-to-day reality, secular sphere that we live in, and by in turn giving those moments again, borrowing sort of like something of the holiness from them. David, yeah. Thank you. So, for those online, so we're talking about, just paraphrasing what David was saying, sort of like bringing up the difference in the poem and the passage, that in the Parsha, Jacob does prevail, over the divine being he wrestles with, and he gets a new name, whereas those lovers, they both defeat one another, and they do not they decide they're not going to tell their names, but then in the end, by coincidence, basically from above, right? That's also very interesting. Like, one imagines a setting where the persons are like, in a building, and from the apartment above, they're calling her. But, I think to me, it's very referring to what Stan's wife was saying about the call from somewhere twice from above could also be read in a different way, that's coming from above, from where, from the heavens, from whatever. So, then he knew her name and he let her go. Just looking at the time, so I find very interesting, and it has come up, but I just wanted to say how the name is such an important factor. So in so many of our Torah and everywhere, it's about the name. It's about knowing. And it's interesting in the passage where it said, give me a blessing, like the blessing, getting a blessing is sort of like knowing the name, but he doesn't know the name, but he gets a new name, and that's a blessing. And here, the moment he knows the name of the woman, he lets her go, which can be read in two ways, I find. It's, on one hand, one could say it is one moment of transitory love that was so intense that it is fine to be over, and at the same time, I can't help but also feeling like really a sadness in terms of he knows the name and she leaves and he lets her go and they're separating. Do you want to say something? Rabbi Klickfeld? Right. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Rabbi Klickfeld was pointing to this interplay that Amichai does so often between the erotic and the divine, and how often, in word literature, in so many different spheres of our lives and of art, how the experience of love, of human love, of erotic love, of romantic love, can have these glimpses of divinity, and how knowing the name and living this always together in one moment is basically not achievable, which then might actually say that even though Amichai stopped being observant, but that there is something about the divine love that human love, no matter how amazing and deep it can be, cannot achieve. And so I find that very, very interesting. The second, is there something to say something? Warren? Of who? Yes. Yeah, thank you. So Warren pointed out, first of all, that the poem is written from the man's perspective, and that also that in order to let me paraphrase that, once he was able to name it and he knew the name, then he could let it go, which shows that it is so hard to name super intense things and experiences, and that there are moments that only when we know what it is, we will be able to keep it and also to let it go. And yes, there were other things. I mean, of course, the lalechet and let her go, that echoes what is also, especially in the Parsha, let me go when I can only go when I know the name. I can only go then. Yeah, so we want to have time for Mariv. I do want to have two wrap-up things, and forgive me if I change course with the poems, because I can't help myself. So the other poem that I brought, since you have it, I brought it because it is an example, I find, where Amichai takes his secular view way further than in this first poem. Because while here there is still this echo of this intense that a moment of intense human encounter can have like 1 second of divinity, even though it can't like keep it. The second one, my head is really, really, really centered in the secular world. However, I want to point, if you look at it at home again, maybe it does end with the word yadech, when it talks about the hand of the woman who's stroking his head, which is or might still be seen as an echo of a divine attribute, because we talk so often about the hand of God. So this is just something. And I am going to be for a moment the private poet. As some of you know, I have a poetry collection coming out. It's coming out in December, and it was started by one poem that I'm going to read, and it turned into a series of poems, and those poems eventually became the chapbook that is going to come out next month by Ben Yehuda Press. And you will see why I brought it, not just because I just want to read any poem, but it's called At Dawn, and it is called After Jacob and the Angel by Yehuda Amichai. And I just wanted to read it as another midrash that I'm providing. You will return to the east at the height of summer. Already the fans in my apartment are turning fast. At dawn, I can't stop thinking about the poem you sent. I tan my skin, my swimsuit leaves white lines for you, to see and touch the way a humid summer does, slowly, oblivious to age. Time is marked by the appearance of morning purple and fireflies, by when to water the plants, another flask of sunscreen, a new week. The city turns into a village by the sea. In the grocery store, the label, grown in California, makes me grin. I buy an extra pint of berries for good measure as a charm. The last word from you I have is yes, all caps. But the weather forecast is not always accurate. I keep thinking of the poem you sent, imagine that long wave coming to the shore. I water the plants. I spot another flower on the vine. Soon you might be in this garden too. At dawn, you might let me go into the lurking autumn of my body. Do we even need to struggle? You already know my name.
You have been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast site or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about Temple Beth Am Los Angeles, go to tbala.org.